All right, here we are, and DJ Succotash in the house. Good to see you. And here we are, Wednesday, June 12th, 2024. And it feels like it has been a long, long time since I've done a weekly live stream. And I think it's felt like that because it has been a long time. So glad to be back. Just got back from Cine Gear yesterday afternoon and ready to jump into more content and stuff like that. Hopefully, we'll get a few people coming to hang out. How are you, DJ? Hope life has been going well, and would love to do a catch up in the near future. Find out if there's been any crazy projects going on. And I'm just kind of settling back into the barn and the studio space and kind of unpacking everything related to Cine Gear. Jeff, good to see you. Good evening to you. Afternoon here. And Brandon is here, but not for long. Um, and I realize now, Brandon, when you came into the chat here, that I'm going to have to do a separate episode about the black and white challenge because I have been inundated today with so many different things related to catching up, which is what always happens when you are gone for a week and work doesn't stop. David, good to have you here as well. And yeah, we're just going to chat a little bit. We'll see how long this one goes. But again, it's been a long time since I've done a weekly live stream, and I really kind of want to jump into questions people have about Cine Gear, some of the new equipment and kit and gear that was announced. And I don't really have anything formal to go over. It's just more a conversation. So anytime you're here on the live stream, if you put an @ symbol and then the C47, then that would be great. And let's get some conversations going. Brad, good to have you. And the whole point here is to share, ask questions, get conversations going. And I do this every week or normally every week so that we can have a forum for discussing the tech and craft of video production and filmmaking. So I'm happy to go over anything that is within reason. We generally leave politics and religion out of it. Most science stuff as well, unless it relates to lights and things like that. And we really just try to focus on the stuff that we do day in and day out and that we love to do. So let's get the conversation going. What do you want to talk about? You want to talk about cameras, lights, other things? Was there anything that you saw on newsshooter.com or CineD that you liked? That would be good to know about. I'm sure I have an email from Brandon with some image that I'm supposed to bring into the live stream. It's not going to happen. And again, I need to basically get this contest all sorted out. There were not a tremendous amount of submissions for the black and white photo contest, but there were some. And there you go. And David wants to talk about the C400. So let's do it. I'm just writing down a note for myself, and then I will get into it. What do you want to know? Brandon, come on. You're killing me. Well, no, I'm killing you. All right, so what do you want to know about the C400? I mean, I don't know everything about it, but I've unpacked a little bit. I've kind of gone through the camera, and there we go. Yeah, those magnetic cable ties from Wooden Camera, pretty cool. I'm also really liking the, where are they? I have them here. These are not new, but these are the Metcalf noodles, which are color-coded, basically better versions of bongo ties. And you can get them in various lengths. So Chris sent some of those over to me. I'm going to do an episode of those soon. And general thoughts on the Canon EOS C400. I think that it's going to be a camera that is going to be right for a lot of people. Now, when we take a look at the digital cinema camera landscape right now, it's very different than it was even 3 or 4 years ago. We have uh, an F ton of mirrorless cameras out there, some of them which are pretty exceptional. And if you start sort of at that bottom price point of what you can get now, where you have the Sony FX30 that floats between $16 and $1,800 US on on any given day, when they sometimes discount it by a couple $100. And then you couple that with something like a Sigma 18 to 50 or their 28 to 70 or something like that. It's an exceptional value for a small mirrorless camera in terms of feature sets. And then you sort of jump up and you get into your Canon R5C camera, which is a very different camera compared to the FX30, and really is a true hybrid kind of stills and cinema camera, and just has a tremendous amount inside of it in terms of what you can do. And then of course you have the FX3, which is a great camera as well. But to me, the thing about that camera that is not as appealing to me is that when you drop down to Super 35, you're basically in HD resolution. So you've got to have a camera with a higher megapixel count to be able to pull that off the way, even the A7C II does. But then there's the jump. And when you jump, you hit the FX6, you have the C70, you obviously have the red Komodo. And then the next jump really is where the C400 is, and then you go to C300 Mark III, C500 Mark II, FX9, Komodo X. There's a lot of cameras that are sitting at that $5,000 to $10,000 US, mark now. And the C400 is an interesting camera because it's a camera that's coming to market at a time where you do have all of these other cameras, but there have been a lot of people who have been waiting for a full frame digital cinema camera that has a native RF mount from Canon. And that's really what the C400 is. And it's really a complete mashup of sort of, in some ways, four Canon digital cinema cameras. And I mentioned this in my episode. It's kind of like a C70, C300 Mark III, C500 Mark II. But in a lot of ways, when I look at the camera and I think about where it evolves from, a lot of that also comes from the C200. So picture, image, triple ISO, everything that I've seen so far, both looking at the camera in exterior location. So at Cine Gear, I was at Canon's booth and I was just going through all the menus and testing it with very expensive lenses on it, but still exterior location, and kind of looking at that. New codecs in there, which are very, stop it, you're kidding me, right, Brandon? Yeah, so really cool. But it's not a camera that's breaking in any one way. It's just combinations of things that make it, in my opinion, a workhorse camera that definitely fits in that corporate and small crew. I still think there are probably advantages to something like a C500 Mark II and its settings and how you can tune that camera, full size ports instead of mini versions of things like Genlock timecode and XLR. And I get that they're trying to make it into a smaller body. I think that if I have one disappointment about the camera, to me, besides not having dual matching card slots, I would have loved to have seen CFX Express slots, and have two of them, and then also had an SD slot for proxy. Is the omission of an electronic viewfinder. So to me, that's the thing. Britt, good to have you. Glad you stopped by, and thanks for the submission. That's awesome. Ty, good to have you as well. So there you go. Let's scroll up here and see what we've got. Okay. Having the age-old issue of my exports color looking different than my timeline edit. Yes, I'm using media encoder. Yes, I've turned off for broadcast and settings. Thoughts. Okay, you're getting some feedback. Not really my workflow. I used to deal with this in olden times, especially when it came to the engine that was driving Final Cut Studio in the olden days. Not Final Cut Pro. We don't call it X anymore, but that. It seems that color pipeline has been worked out, but before, when everything would essentially go through, I believe, a QuickTime engine, then we got all kinds of weird things going on. What do I think about Cine Gear's new location at Warner Brothers? I liked it. It's the first time the show's been there since 2005, so technically it's not a new location, but it is coming back to a location they haven't been to in a very long time. I liked the lot. I mean, it's still taking me time to figure out where everything is, and it's a bit like going into a casino. You come in from one end and you can't figure out where to go. Are you making a left or right, going straight, or behind you to get to a particular vendor or location at the show? And they definitely had some traffic issues in terms of things. I mean, on Friday, maybe they didn't anticipate the amount of people that were coming to the show, but I actually had a friend who was coming just locally, and it took him a really long time to get there, and then he was turned away. He did wind up coming back the next day, but that was an issue. And then just foot traffic wise, it's a working lot. They also have their studio tours, and they were also hosting Cine Gear, so there were big changes from Saturday to Sunday in terms of how they were routing people, sometimes in a frustrating way. Like, for instance, they had 4 or 5 stages that were open that primarily had lighting companies, but some other stuff in them as well. And stage 14 was an addition towards towards leading up to the show. So it wasn't a stage that was originally going to be there, but I guess they had a bunch of other vendors sign up, so they opened it up. And on day one, it was kind of hard to find in terms of signage, but you could find it. On day two, they kind of made you go towards it and then make a left and then go through stage 15, which got very, very busy. And then you'd have to go outside and then make a right and get to stage 14. So it was a little bit out of the way. Other than that, in terms of the traffic issues and stuff, I liked how spread out things were for Cine Gear 2024. I mean, I know the Paramount lot very well, so I know exactly where to go, and it's relatively compact in terms of stuff. So I kind of like that again about the Paramount lot, but it was nice to have it in a new place, and I think it could work out well. So I guess we'll see what happens for 2025, but there you go. Show G, what's happening? What do you think of the newer COB lights shown at Cine Gear 2024? They seem to be very competitive with the Amaran COB products. Prices are very good. I didn't actually look at them, to be honest. They were actually in stage 14, but so was Able Cine, and that's kind of where I was primarily on that stage. I did see this morning that they are discounting their 600 watt bicolor unit for $899 US, which for a 600 watt COB is pretty incredible. No plus minus green, which what I would have loved to have seen. Definitely had dimming curves as part of it, and I'm sure it's a very, very decent light. I'm sure it's fine. It doesn't have all of the bells and whistles, and it doesn't have some of the things like plus minus green that I'd want to see. But as long as the white light is good white light, then I would say it's probably at least worth looking into. There's obviously advantages to being in one ecosystem, and that's why so many people are attracted to all aperture lights or combinations of aperture and Amaran lights. Amran may have had its own booth at the show. I didn't actually see it, though Aperture had a very large presence at the show, and I got to go around with Ted, and I got to see my good friend Tim there and some other people from Aperture. And, they're serious. They're going at it. And so is Nanlite or Nan Lux, and both of those under Nang Wong, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, Ron, the parking seemed to be a big mess. I actually walked back with somebody who I know very well to her car before going to the clubhouse, and it she parked far. And even though we had to trek a little bit, it was probably a lot smarter than dealing with the mess of parking there at the studio. So that was, I would say the parking is a mess when it's at Paramount as well to a degree. That's one of the reasons that I always Uber or Lyft there. But all in all, it seemed like a very healthy show. The numbers were definitely, from what I could see, higher on Friday rather than Saturday, and that's not always the case. But this industry, I've talked about it before. I'll talk about it in the future. This industry is hurting right now, and when you don't have the same quantity of people at work that you usually do during this time of the year, and usually they're at work. Productions usually go dark in the summer, August being a big part of that. Um, then you're more likely to see people go on a Friday than the Saturday if they're not working, because then they can have their weekend with their families, their spouses, their partners. They can go to the beach. They can, go away for the weekend or catch up on stuff around the house. So I think that definitely was part of it this time. And it wasn't that Saturday was dead by any means, but Friday really, by sort of late morning into early afternoon, the show felt very, very busy. Yeah. Mm, there you go. Yeah, that makes sense. Shoji Productions, that Amran was not showing products at Cinegear. And, from a cost perspective, Aperture had a very large presence on the stage that they were in, and that's a big build. And then, it's a lot of people and so on and so forth. So it makes sense. I mean, it'd be interesting to see where Amran, um, goes in terms of shows in the future. It's maybe going to be more of an online initiative. If we think about the beginning days of Aperture, when they were really going after independent and aspiring filmmakers, maybe we'll see more of that kind of content, stuff that's targeted to creators, influencers, things like that. And Aperture definitely is on and in a lane that has to do with mid to high end production. So there's no question about that now in terms of where their focus is as a company, and what they're trying to do is build and create tools for that. Um, and the stuff that I'm seeing come out of Nang Wong, which is the Nan Lux and the Nan Light brands, workhorse lights, and they're definitely coming out with new things, and they're coming out with fixtures that I think are addressing the needs of a lot of cinematographers. I'm excited to see where that company goes in the future, because I think with what I'm seeing coming out of Aperture's camp, that there's definitely room here for things to get better and stuff. Let's have a quick thought experiment or experiment. What C cams have had Mark 2/3 versions? Compare that to what we have now with the C70 and C400 that have RF mount, as much as I would love to see. Uh, an RF C100 type. I don't know if that's even going to happen. I think I understand what you're saying. What you define as a B or a C camera, I think is very different. I'll say this, Brad, for different types of users out there. What might be considered a B or even a C camera to somebody who's working on episodics or features and things like that is very different to that same camera possibly being an A or a B camera to somebody who is in my world. So it just sort of depends on how you're looking at it. I think, the thing that we have to understand about cameras nowadays, which is becoming increasingly similar to what we have to understand about lights, is we talk about sensors or we talk about light arrays, and sort of what people are doing with COB lights, RGB ACL, RGB WW, RGB AW, amber white, is that each company is trying to differentiate themselves and build products that are, in their minds, the best um, version of a product that they can build. And some people hit home runs, some people don't. And the reality is that right now, we have to sift through the fact that there are so many variations of things. And it's becoming increasingly harder for us to kind of make decisions in terms of what lights and what cameras we should use, because it's not even always consistent for a particular manufacturer. So you have two cameras from Sony that are using two sensors. They're seemingly going to produce and capture the same image if you set up the camera the same way in terms of gamma and gamut, um, dynamic range, basically, and your chroma capture, your in terms of stuff. But that's not always going to happen because the sensor's different. And so that's not just a sensitivity thing. It is, in a way, sort of how that camera is going to capture an image. And that even though seemingly everything's the same, you've got the same, color temperature in terms of your white balance set, you've got the same type of gamma gamut settings in there, you've got seemingly a similar or the same codec, but because that sensor is different, you're not going to get the same result, right? So you could see that even from manufacturers in the lighting industry. You have two lights that might use two different technologies. One's RGB ACL, one's RGB WW. And even though both of those lights are set to 3200 or 4400 or 55 or 5600 Kelvin, what you're going to do is you're going to get something that's slightly different, because the engine, the thing, the sensor in a camera, the light engine in a light is different. And so we have all of these variations, which makes it even more so, as we would say, the Wild West. And that's the stuff that we're living with. So, you know, if we could have the same sensors, this is kind of a long answer, if it is even an answer, Brad, to your question. If we could have the same sensors in each of the cameras and we knew that those sensors were the same, then it would be much easier to say this is an ideal B or C camera to my A camera. But very oftentimes, especially now that we're looking at cameras that are in this sub $10,000 range, I'm not talking about, 10,000 plus. It's generally easier, unless the form factor is a consideration, to get two matching cameras or three matching cameras. And it's becoming more attainable because of the cost. Your C400 coming in at under $8,000 US, I think, is the correct price point. They could have very easily have come out with that camera and said it's going to start at $10,000 to $12,000 US. And I think they would have sold cameras, but I think they're smart enough to keep it in that under $8,000 US area, which I think is actually the right price for the camera. I think anywhere between, $7,000 and $8,000, because they're not going to completely cannibalize the C70, but it allows the C300 Mark III and the C500 Mark II to hang out for a while. What I am hoping, though I don't expect to see it anytime soon, is I'd like to see just sort of one model above the C400 that has open gate, it has dual card slots, native RF mount. It would be great if they could do something like 32-bit float like they're doing in that GH7. From an audio standpoint, the more compact we can make the whole kit, the better. So put good preamps in there, 32-bit float. And that's what small crews need. They need camera systems that they take out of a bag that have built-in NDs, they have built-in XLR inputs. Yes, we're going to have to deal with the C400 with, the adapters to go from mini to full-size XLR. The same thing is going to have to happen in terms of cabling for some other things. Though I do believe they have mini to full-size XLR cables. And if they do, then, you could get rid of a dongle. It does mean you're buying new cabling and things like that, but there's just a lot of stuff to unpack here when it comes to all of this. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to see something that is even smaller than maybe a C70, that could be a B or C camera for Canon. And what's really interesting is, we're talking about cameras here. When you look at Panasonic with their new GH7, to me, what I'm seeing now is technology inside of that camera, and interestingly, the licensing with ARRI for basically their looks and to match that. And I've heard actually from people at ARRI that it's very, very close. I mean, you're not going to get the same dynamic range. It's impossible because of the camera that you're using. But when we start to get into Panasonic's full frame cameras, if they start to do some similar things there and they've started to upgrade their AF system and things, it could get really interesting. I hope that's kind of an answer, Brad. It's a big conversation, and other people can actually chip in. Ben's actually come in with a little comment there. New food experiments, nothing at the moment, but I've been gone for the live stream for a while, Brandon. New food experiments. Nothing major. Nothing that's within the category of we should dive in. But if you want to talk about food, I'm always game for that. All right, let's get some other stuff going here. I can continue this conversation on cameras 1,000,000%, or we can talk about other kit that you want to discuss, or just things that you have going on with productions, things that you're trying to make decisions about that you want to talk out. I'm game for all of that, so please let me know, and we can actually kind of dig in. It's just a simple at the C47, throw something up there in the comments, and away we go. Steadicam, yeah. So Steadicam Access is really interesting because if you look at Steadicam's under $10,000 offering prior to this, in terms of going into a full system, the Zephyr system, you're talking about a vest, you're talking about an arm, that's the two part that has the springs inside of it, and then you have the sled, which is a vertical component that attaches to the arm attaches to the vest. You had a completely manual Steadicam system, which is about $9,000, and that was using the A30 arm, the A30 vest, and could support basically a camera configuration of about 20 pounds. And that includes the battery and the monitor. The batteries don't weigh as much anymore. What's up, Darren? And the monitor weighs almost nothing. And then you have the entire system, and that system is what it is. I mean, there's electronics there that relate to powering your monitor, right? But they don't have anything to do with the mechanical gimbal-based system that is traditionally in a Steadicam. Now, on the higher end of the Steadicam world, there is SLED, which uses what's called Volt technology, which is an axis assist technology, which currently is only for 2 axes. And the new Steadicam Axis, what's interesting about that is they've sort of downstreamed that technology, but also upgraded it in terms of adding a third axis. So you have pan, tilt, roll, all with assist. This is extremely useful for people when it comes to horizon, but also just being able to tune your Steadicam in a way that you have a certain amount of inertia, you have a certain amount of drag or friction resistance, and then also just being able to do cool things like just set your Steadicam to any position and have it hold. And there's sort of the normal one where it's set to a position, you move it, and then it goes back to that position. But there's also a mode called sticky where you can go like this in any position and it will just hold in that position. So, and then you can of course start to pan and roll and do things like that, and get some really interesting stuff. So for the same $9,000 US, you're now getting an entire vest arm sled system that includes the Volt 3-axis assist feature. And I think that's going to be really interesting for a lot of operators going forward. And again, similar weight capacity. They'll do something in the future with the Volt system on the higher end, which will um, support up to 50 pounds, but that requires a different vest arm sled combo. So that's interesting. Yes, I like the opportunity to switch up that RF to PL mount as well. Ron, Lightcraft Jet Set, I didn't go over to their booth at this show. I've followed up with them quite a bit after NAB. You know, I'm not sure how I feel because I really like what that company's doing in terms of virtual production, but my feeling is they've been developing that for a long time and it's really great technology inside of there. And the fact that it's not just sitting on your phone, but you can actually use Axon CMO product to essentially calibrate lenses on a mirrorless camera, digital cinema camera, and then have all of that data being captured for post-production is awesome. And I love what they're doing, but I do feel like, and I've said this to people before, that simple is hard. And Jet Set has been developed over many years. It's not a brand new product, though we're starting to learn about it, and really the sort of like launch of that and us becoming aware of it was at the BSC Expo at the beginning of the year. But I just feel like, and I've talked to them about it, I feel like that product could become simpler. Um, there's so many things inside of there. But when you want to capture and democratize virtual production and capture that small crew audience, you've got to have a product that takes you through that process in a way that doesn't require lots of additional apps in post production, lots of additional post processing, because then you're kind of getting back up to that brain bar where you have lots of people who have to be involved in that process, as opposed to saying, we've got an app, this app can work on a smartphone or a tablet if the cameras are decent enough, and it will also connect to and work with other professional cameras, if you want to call them that. But when you're done capturing, I think that the vast majority of us just want to get into an NLE, right? We want to get out of whatever it is that we captured, and we want to process that within an NLE's environment. So when people have conversations and they say, well, you know, Unreal Engine, Blender, Nuke, all of these things, while those make a lot of sense when you have a brain bar and you have a larger crew, I'm not sure that's where we're going to be going in terms of virtual production for the masses. And so simple is hard. Hopefully somebody's going to work on simple. I think they've got a lot of great bones to what's there with Lightcraft Jet Set. But I feel like they need to simplify the workflow. And that doesn't mean making it dumber. It just means simple is hard. And if you can do simple, but have it be full featured and do it professionally, so that what you're doing is you're working with photorealistic environments and you can allow people to do virtual production, not in the way it's being done on big volumes, then yeah. Ben, I never used the Steadicam Junior. I did and still use the GlideCam Smooth Shooter, which was the first affordable vest ARM sled-based system out there. Sully, good to have you here. But never the Steadicam Junior. But again, I think what Steadicam is doing with the Axis is they're kind of creating a new, not product category, but it is kind of, but it's really a new product in a price point that is allowing people to get into Steadicam with their new technology, the Volt technology, at a very reasonable price. Because most people who are going to be using a Steadicam system with smaller digital cinema cameras are going to be fine with the Axis, because 20 pounds, I mean, the sled itself, it's really about a 30-pound capacity, but the sled is about 10. And then you add the monitor and the battery, and you've probably got 15 plus pounds for your camera build. And these, and you can power your camera directly from the battery that's at the bottom of the sled. So you don't necessarily have to have an extra battery, even though I did in the videos. You could just as easily power it without a battery on the camera body itself, and you would be reducing the weight considerably. And then 15 plus pounds, you have a lot of options. Newer digital cinema cameras don't weigh a tremendous amount. So gives you some flexibility in terms of the glass that you're using and stuff like that. But a lot of people are using primes anyway, and if they're using zooms, they're usually shorter zooms, because most Steadicam and gimbal-based stuff doesn't really work extremely well on long lenses. So you'll see that people kind of live in that 14 to kind of 35, maybe up to 50 millimeter. And some of that has to do with sensor size, right? In terms of your field of view, how much or how little of the world you're seeing. But I think that's an important consideration. There were a lot of good-looking support solutions at Cinegear that related to gimbals. Flow Cine, Ready Rig, stuff that has to do that. I still feel that 9-Dot Solutions, DJ, is some of the better grip stuff that's out there. And there were a lot of grip companies, but I didn't really spend a lot of time looking at that. And in all honesty, and I think I mentioned it in one of the videos I did, I didn't get a lot of time to walk the show. It's sort of Cinegear shouldn't be more than 2 days long, but I wish there was a third day, because by the time I get sort of halfway through the second day, I feel like I'm starting to breathe. And for better or for worse, for better for me, at least personally, I know a lot of people at the show. And what that means is that when I go to Cinegear, it's really an opportunity to catch up with and have conversations with a lot of people who are colleagues or friends. And so the gear, to a degree, becomes secondary to me. And, of course, I'm going to spend time with the C400 and looking at the Steadicam Axis and going over and seeing what might be happening that are, new, that's new in the way of lighting. But I'm not spending the time to say, starting on Friday at 11 a.m., I'm going to start going booth to booth and looking at everybody's wares, because I just don't have the time to do it. And so I do wish I had a little bit more time, but I wouldn't want that extra time in place of being able to spend time with friends and colleagues and being involved with what they're doing at the show, awards that they're receiving, and the like. So, I don't get an opportunity to see a lot of these people except at shows like NAB and at Cinegear. So it's important for me to spend that time with them, because it just is, life's too short. All right, what do we got? 3:39. We got about 20 minutes. We got time to talk about more stuff. What else? What else do you want to know about? I thought DOP choice, pretty interesting. The SnapBridge product, which is this sort of like fanned out modifier, they made a 3-foot version of it now, which looks pretty interesting. And that with a small light bridge mirror could be interesting to me. It's, you're kind of getting this combination of soft and hard light together. So I think it's an interesting concept. It definitely is, for me, a more practical approach to using light bridge mirrors than, than just using them by themselves. I feel that for what I do, it makes more sense. But I really like that snap bridge, white on one side, black on the other. And now they have a company called Bluff Bounce that they're working with, which have these very interesting versions of the fabrics that they're putting on that product, where it might be a little bit more blue on the top and then it's more tan on the bottom. And the idea is that in the real world, reflected light is generally not neutral. It is in the studio environment, in the controlled environment, but in the real world, when you're walking around a city and you're going and around there, you're getting essentially light coming from the sky, and then you've got light bouncing off of buildings and things like that. And that's kind of the concept with the Bluff Bounce stuff that DOP Choice is incorporating into their products. So I think it's pretty cool. Was there a Matthews picnic on Sunday? There was not, Brad. They apparently are now doing that sort of garage sale every 2 years. So on Sunday, what happened was 3 events that I was very well aware of, besides the masterclass that was happening over at Cream Source, which was a cinematography masterclass. There was Sigma had their annual Sunday event. You had Hot Rod Cameras having their event, and then you had Tiffin with their Tech Day, which I was directly involved with. So that I helped set up for at least the filter test room on Thursday all day. I was there setting up for that, and then on Sunday that event went from about 11 to 4. We got there early in the morning, and that was an all-day affair and very, very well attended. And they even had a shuttle that was going between Sigma, Hot Rod, and Tiffin, and lots of great stuff, especially because at Tiffin they had a lot of outside vendors having to do with gimbals and support systems. So you had Ari, FlowCine, Ready Rig, obviously Tiffin and the Steadicam products, and a bunch of other people as well. And then inside they had the filter room that with the set that I was involved with, and then there was the main training room where they basically had their moderated panels and they had speakers and things like that. And this was sort of in some ways part 2 of what happened at NAB, because this is the 50th anniversary of Steadicam. So Garrett Brown was there, and there was a lot of things tied in and around that as well. But I did this last year, the Tech Day, and the comparison between last year and this year is night and day in terms of attendance and how many vendors there were, so on and so forth. It was very well attended, so I like that. Canon could do a cut down of the C400 collab with you. Call it C4. Yeah, I've done a lot of stuff with Canon in the past. I don't think I'm going to be doing immediately any content on that camera for Canon, but I'm hoping to get the support from Canon to be able to do more C400 content here on this channel. So sort of setting up, with a monitor and the camera and digging into some of the features a little bit more in depth with a less busy background like I had at Tiffin, because that's what was set up, and it worked well for some videos and not for others, but you get the idea. Are there any pro audio for film production focused shows in Los Angeles? I don't know. There might be. I'm not aware of them. I don't know the answer to that. If there's going to be, places like Gotham Sound would know about it. You obviously have, well, it's not for film production, but you have NAMM, and that kind of crosses over a lot of different categories. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I can think of off the top of my head. No. You like seeing the barn background. Yeah, this background was set up because I did the Calibrite video and I haven't moved it yet. I could literally walk over and just 86 that and go back to that. Maybe I will for next week. Probably shoot one more video here this week and then they go. Cinema Audio Society. Okay, Thaddeus. And do they do a show every year, or are they just resource like the ASC, American Society of Cinematographers? I'd be interested to find out. if they have a show or something like this. Yeah. Yeah, this is less cluttered, Sully. So it's good when I want to do a video and it's just a little focus and I can throw a little bit of light on that background and give it a little bit of a lift. Usually I have a light sitting down around me, but there isn't one right now. This thing has a light in it, which is kind of ridiculous, this battery. See if I remember how to light it. I don't know. It's not going to do much. Not a lot of lumens coming off of that thing. Practically nothing. Close up, maybe. It's not doing much. You get the idea. All right. Cinema Audio Society is a resource as far as you know, Thaddeus says. Call them and ask. Yeah, they probably have a website, and you can see if there's any events and things like that. Yeah. But I do know, like, for instance, Deity, because I ran into Andrew, they were not exhibiting at Cine Gear. So there you go. Yeah, I would say, Sully, just for giggles, if you want to call it a hair light, for me, you can put the word hair in quotes. Will it? Yeah, very close proximity. I think it's more so you can something. You could say that it's a flashlight, but this thing isn't even as powerful as your phone. So, gimmicky. DJ Succotash says, so I was asked to advise on some gear for one of our social creators working on an iPhone. I was thinking of suggesting just a basic clip-on polarizer to help with contrast and reflections. Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea. I don't have it here on the desk, but if it is phone-based, the new magnetic 58 millimeter filter system, because it's the MagSafe, is that what it's called? The back of the, something like that, of the iPhone, they make that now from Tiffin. So you can basically take any of their 58 millimeter screw-on filters and use it with the iPhone. And it'll cover all three of the lenses if you're, let's say, on a 15 Pro. And it's cool because it's not just a couple of filters that you can use. So you could use a polarizer or a Vari-ND and things like that. But polarizers are great with those reflections and contrast. So the answer is, I think it's a good idea. You just have to kind of look. There's some cheaper ones out there. I'm not sure of the sort of quality of the glass and the filters. The thing about filters, even UV filters and things like that, is it's kind of garbage in, garbage out, right? So if the quality of the glass that you're putting on in front of other glass isn't good quality, it's like you can take a $2,500 lens and you could put a UV filter on it or a crappy ND filter, and that's the beginning of the garbage. And it doesn't matter that there's a beautiful, sharp, lens that's behind it, or a lens with character, or whatever it is. You put that shitty, let's just call a spade, filter in front of it, and it's not going to get better magically because the filter sucks. So there you go. And then, the gear for iPhone stuff is just getting crazy in terms of the cages and everything else that people have. Marshall, good to have you. I'm feeling with all the new camera developments that it might be time to transition away from owning them and into renting appropriate cams for every production. Thoughts? Well, there's definitely an argument for that. And I think it really has to do with what types of content and how often you are creating that type of content is. That was probably a lame way of saying that. But, for me, you really have to make a decision in terms of, if I'm doing a production, let's say I'm producing something once a month, and I'm going out there. Well, renting probably makes a lot of sense because you're not doing production day in, day out, or even weekly. You're kind of ramping up for a production. You go to a rental house or Lens Rentals or whatever. Ideally a rental house because you can do a checkout day. but you've got to build that into your budget. Or if you're doing lens rentals, you receive the stuff, make sure it arrives a couple of days before your production, take everything out, set it all up, do a checkout, just basically test everything, make sure you don't have any issues. But if you're doing production on a regular basis and it's in the weekly territory, then I think thinking about owning equipment, especially if you're going to get a rental on it for a client, makes a lot of sense, especially nowadays because we have camera systems that are quite affordable, right? You've got cameras that are very, very capable. If you want to jump through hoops and work around sort of the shortcomings of a mirrorless camera, where you're thinking about ND and you're thinking about, you know, audio in a different way than you would with something that had all of that built in, your cost of entry is quite low, and the quality of picture you can get with it is very high now. There's a lot of projects that I've just brought the FX30 and A7C2, and because my crew size is so small, me and one or two other people, I have to have a camera system where the AF system is rock solid, and it allows me to take my attention off of something. And um, I think one of the things that is important is to understand that, not every camera system is going to be able to do that. The C400 looks to be quite an upgrade finally from Canon in terms of their autofocus system. So looking good. How am I avoiding reflections in my glasses? Just where the light is, you can kind of see it up there. It's a little bit higher and on an angle, but I'm still making sure that I'm getting a catch light. And I also have anti-reflective coating, though, again, if I look up there, you can see the reflection, but it's a lot more forgiving when it's a big soft source than when it's something harder. So bringing it in closer, but up a little bit higher, making sure you're still getting a catch is kind of part of it. But if I had glasses that didn't have that anti-reflective coating, I'd have a lot more problems. It's finesse for sure, but I'm just used to dealing with it, Ben. Brett the Monster, what's up? I'm thinking the same thing about possibly just renting camera bodies going forward. It would also be a potential gig losing decision if a last minute project comes up. Yeah. I mean, look, I'm not saying people need to go out and buy cameras. I'm just saying that depending on the type of work you're doing and how often you're doing it, our cost of entry right now can be relatively low comparatively to 5, 7, 10 years ago. So, the bald head comments. Exactly. It's stopping all the reflections. That's right. It's just bouncing off of my head, and they're going. Sorry about the little mic tap there. So, there's so many variables when it comes to renting versus buying. But if that kit is working on a regular basis, then it makes sense, but you've got to get rentals out of it. It's got to be built into your projects, and you've got to have a kit rental. And if you are investing in cameras and lenses and lighting and things like that, there has to be a return on investment. And because at least certain segments of the market have been hurting so badly because of the strikes and sort of the collateral damage of that. Because what's happening right now isn't COVID related. It really is because of the strikes. And the industry just still hasn't bounced back. And I think they're, waiting for IATSE to sort out, which would sort of be about a month and change away, month and a half away. Once that's ratified, and I think there's a lot of, feelings that it will be, then I think then the planning starts. But it's not like a switch. When everything was ratified with the strikes last year. Hey, Linda, great to have you, and thank you for all the comments and feedback on the channel. When they were ratified back in December, everybody just sort of magically thought we're going to start up and it's going to be, this way in terms of what was happening, and it was all going to just magically happen at the beginning of January. Not so. And people who know the industry knew better, and they said at best we're looking at around July-ish for when things are picking up. And I think that's true. And it's not one or two companies. Everybody's hurting right now. So I hope it gets sorted out. All right. Any new mannequin tech? Come on, David. You're cool. You got your miniatures and all that stuff. But I think the mannequin tech is going to be replaced with the AI tech. And that's just plain scary. When OpenAI buys Boston Dynamics or vice versa, just pack it in, kids, you know? Just it's going to be time to have a homestead. All right, a couple more minutes here. I think we're almost done. I'm going to run out and get reset. I've got a meeting at 4:30, and then I'm heading out the door after that. So anybody else have anything that we want to end up with? It's great to be back here doing the weekly live stream. We will, housekeeping, by the way, be back next Wednesday. And next Wednesday's episode, the 19th, will be with myself, Ben Barden, Caleb Pike, Camera Flask. So drinks on hand, leaded or unleaded. And we will be chatting about these subjects some more. Linda, I'm not trying to sound depressing, but some of it is depressing and some of it's not. I think there's going to be a lot of positive that comes from all of this new technology as well. I am not down in the dumps about all of it. The Boston Dynamics OpenAI thing, maybe I am. Everybody, absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming to this. Tell your friends about this channel. It's not going anywhere, and I have a lot of content to do. I'm looking at your at that shine of a head over there, and I see some specular highlights hanging out on your avatar. David, again, I'm DeBrown, DJ Succotash, Mars Scholl, Sully, Linda, the other David, Brett the Monster, Ben, who else we got in here? All the peoples Thaddeus, who come here every week and contribute comments and feedback and just are part of the channel. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you, Marshall, for the kind words. And thank you, everybody, for being a part of this thing. We'll keep doing it. Come on. You're killing me here. Look at this before we leave. Fantastic. You're, I appreciate that very, very much. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you. Keep watching the episodes, the daily ones, and I'll see you next week on Camera Flask. And we'll keep doing these weekly live streams as well. And I'll talk to you soon. All the best.